human baby shared its oxygen mask with an injured bear cub in the ambulance. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The rain hammered against the windshield as paramedic Connor Adams gripped the steering wheel tighter. His partner, Savannah Reed, was hunched over two patients in the back. A sight so unusual it made Connor's heart race faster than the sirens blaring above them. One patient was 18-month-old baby boy named Luca Winters, found crying in his overturned car seat after the accident. The other was a small brown bear cub, no bigger than a house cat, its breathing shallow and labored from internal injuries. Both had been victims of the same devastating crash just 20 minutes ago. "How's the baby doing back there?" Connor shouted over the noise. Savannah checked the oxygen mask fitted loosely over little Luca's face. The child's bright blue eyes were wide open, strangely calm despite everything that had happened. Stable for now, but we need to get him checked for internal bleeding. The cub, though... She paused, listening to its wheezing breaths. "I don't think it's going to make it to the wildlife center." The ambulance hit a pothole and both patients shifted slightly. That's when something extraordinary happened that would leave both paramedics speechless. Baby Luca, with movements that seemed far too purposeful for his age, reached his tiny hand toward the struggling bear cub lying on the stretcher beside him. The cub's dark eyes met the baby's, and for a moment time seemed to stop inside that racing ambulance. "Savannah, are you seeing this?" Connor's voice cracked through the radio. But Savannah was already watching, her medical training forgotten as she witnessed something that defied logic. The baby was trying to remove his own oxygen mask, his small fingers fumbling with the soft plastic edges. His intention was clear. He wanted to help the dying cub breathe. The cub made a soft whimpering sound, almost like a plea. Luca responded with gentle cooing noises, as if they were having a conversation only they could understand. The baby finally managed to loosen his mask and, with determination that shocked the adults around him, began pushing it toward the bear cub's snout. "We can't let him do that," Savannah whispered, but her hands remained frozen. Something about the scene felt sacred, untouchable. The cub, sensing the offered help, weakly lifted its head. Its small black nose touched the edge of the oxygen mask, and for the first time since the accident, its breathing seemed to ease slightly. The baby kept the mask positioned there, his other hand gently resting on the cub's soft fur. Connor's eyes met Savannah's in the rearview mirror. In 15 years of emergency medicine, neither had witnessed anything like this raw display of compassion from someone so young. The baby didn't understand medical protocols or species differences. He only knew another living being was struggling, and he wanted to help. "The oxygen levels," Savannah finally managed to say, checking her equipment. "The baby's saturation is dropping, but he won't let go of that mask." Outside, the storm was getting worse. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the forest road ahead. They were still 10 minutes from the nearest hospital, and both patients needed immediate attention. But how could they separate two beings who had found such an unlikely connection in their darkest moment? The cub's breathing became more regular as it shared the oxygen with baby Luca. Its eyes, which had been glazed with pain, now held a spark of alertness. The tiny paw that had been limp was now pressed against the baby's arm, as if returning the gesture of friendship. "Connor," Savannah's voice was barely audible, "I think they're helping each other somehow." The baby made soft babbling sounds, the same ones he might make playing with toys at home. But these sounds seemed to comfort the injured cub, whose ears perked up slightly at each gentle noise. It was as if they had created their own world inside that ambulance, a world where pain and fear couldn't reach them as long as they stayed together. Suddenly, the ambulance radio crackled to life. It was Dr. Michael Hayes from the emergency department. "ETA on those patients. We have the trauma team standing by." Connor grabbed the radio. "5 minutes out, but Doc, we have an unusual situation here. The baby patient is sharing his oxygen with the bear cub. We've never seen anything like it." There was silence on the other end before Dr. Hayes responded. "Repeat that? Did you say sharing oxygen?" "That's correct." The 18-month-old removed his mask and is holding it for the cub to breathe. Both seem to be stabilizing, but it's the strangest thing we've ever witnessed. As the ambulance raced through the storm, baby Luca continued his vigil over the bear cub. His small hand never wavered as he held the oxygen mask in place, and his eyes never left the cub's face. The cub, in return, seemed to draw strength from the baby's presence, its breathing becoming steadier with each mile they traveled. "You know what this means, don't you?" Savannah said quietly. Connor nodded grimly. "We're going to have to separate them when we arrive. The baby needs immediate medical attention, and the cub has to go to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center." They both looked back at the unlikely pair, dreading the moment they would have to break this magical connection that had formed between two innocent souls in crisis. But as they approached the hospital, something unexpected happened that would change everything. The hospital's emergency entrance was blocked by a massive tree that had fallen during the storm. Sparks flew from damaged power lines, and emergency crews were working frantically to clear the debris. "We can't get through," Connor said, his voice tense. "The backup entrance is another 15 minutes away, and with this storm..." Dr. Hayes's voice came through the radio again. "All units, the main emergency entrance is compromised. Redirect to St. Mary's Hospital instead. It's 20 minutes out, but it's your only option." 20 more minutes. Both patients were stable for now, but Connor could see the worry in Savannah's eyes. Baby Luca was still holding the oxygen mask over the cub's nose, but his own breathing was becoming more labored. His pink cheeks were now pale, and tiny beads of sweat formed on his forehead. "We need to split the oxygen," Savannah said, reaching for additional equipment. "The baby can't keep giving up his supply." But as soon as she moved toward them, both the baby and the cub reacted. Luca's grip on the mask tightened, and he made distressed whimpering sounds. The cub, sensing the separation attempt, let out a soft growl and pressed closer to the baby. It was as if they understood that being apart meant danger for both of them. "Wait," Connor said, studying them through the rearview mirror. "Look at their vital signs." Savannah checked her monitors and gasped. Both patients' heart rates had synchronized. The baby's pulse was steady at 110 beats per minute, and amazingly, the cub's had matched it exactly. Their breathing patterns had also aligned, rising and falling in perfect rhythm. "That's medically impossible," she whispered. "How can their bodies be sinking like this?" The rain started coming down even harder, creating a thunderous sound on the ambulance roof. Lightning illuminated the dark forest around them, and in those brief flashes of light Connor noticed something moving between the trees. Dark shadows keeping pace with their vehicle. "Savannah," he said quietly, "we might have another problem." She looked up from her patients. "What do you mean?" "I think we're being followed." Connor was right. Through the storm, a large brown bear was running alongside the road, keeping up with the ambulance despite the rough terrain. Behind her, 2 more bears emerged from the forest. The mother bear's eyes glowed in the ambulance's side lights, and her purpose was clear. She was tracking her cub. "Oh no," Savannah breathed. "That's the cub's family." The adult bears were gaining ground, their powerful legs carrying them effortlessly through the muddy forest floor. The mother bear occasionally let out deep, mournful calls that seemed to pierce through the storm and reach the ambulance. Each time she called, the little cub inside would lift its head and make soft, responding sounds. Baby Luca seemed to sense the connection, too. He began making different sounds now. Not his usual baby babble, but something that almost sounded like he was trying to mimic the cub's responses to its mother. The cub would answer back, creating an impossible conversation between human child and wild animal. "Connor, they're getting closer," Savannah warned. The bears were now running directly parallel to the ambulance, easily keeping pace. "I know, but if I speed up in this weather, we could slide off the road." The mother bear suddenly changed direction, cutting across their path. Connor had to brake hard to avoid hitting her, sending medical equipment sliding across the ambulance floor. The baby and cub held on to each other instinctively, the mask remaining perfectly positioned between them. "She's trying to stop us," Connor realized. "She wants her cub back." But then, something truly shocking happened. The mother bear stopped in the middle of the road ahead of them, standing in the full glare of the ambulance headlights. Instead of showing aggression, she sat down and simply waited, watching the vehicle with an intelligence that seemed almost human. "I've never seen anything like this," Savannah said. "It's like she knows her cub is being helped." Inside the ambulance, the little cub became more agitated, trying to move toward the front windows. It made urgent crying sounds that clearly said it wanted to reach its mother. Baby Luca, still holding the oxygen mask, began crying too, but his tears seemed to be for the cub's distress rather than his own. Connor made a decision that went against every protocol he'd ever learned. He turned off the engine. "What are you doing?" Savannah asked. "I'm going to open the back doors." "Connor, you can't. That's a wild bear out there." "Look at them," he said, gesturing to the baby and cub. "Something extraordinary is happening here. That baby saved this cub's life by sharing his oxygen. Maybe there's more to this than we understand." The mother bear approached the back of the ambulance slowly, her massive form moving with surprising gentleness. When Connor opened the doors, she stood just out of reach, her dark eyes taking in the scene before her. What happened next left both paramedics speechless. The mother bear made a low, rumbling sound that was clearly directed at baby Luca. The baby, without fear, reached out his free hand toward her. The cub nuzzled closer to Luca, and for a moment the three of them were connected in an impossible circle of trust. The mother bear seemed to understand that the human baby was helping her cub. She made another sound, softer this time, that almost sounded like gratitude. Then she did something that shocked everyone. She gently touched the baby's outstretched hand with her massive paw, so carefully that she barely made contact with his tiny fingers. "Are you recording this?" Connor whispered to Savannah. She nodded, her hands shaking as she held up her phone. Nobody is going to believe this, but their moment was interrupted by the radio. "Ambulance 47, what's your status?" "We show you've stopped moving." Connor grabbed the radio. We're fine, just dealing with the storm." He couldn't tell them about the bears. Who would believe that a mother bear was having a peaceful interaction with their human patient? That her cub and a human baby had formed a bond that seemed to transcend species? The mother bear stepped back, seeming to understand that she couldn't take her cub yet. It was badly injured and needed human medical care. She made one more sound to her baby, who answered back feebly but with determination. It was as if they were saying goodbye with a promise to meet again. As the mother bear disappeared back into the forest, Connor started the engine again. But the experience had changed everything. Baby Luca was still sharing his oxygen with the cub, but now both seemed calmer, as if the mother's visit had given them strength. 20 minutes to St. Mary's, Connor announced, but his voice carried a new weight. They weren't just transporting patients anymore. They were guardians of a miracle that had unfolded in the back of their ambulance. "Connor," Savannah said softly, "look at this." She showed him the oxygen readings. Both the baby and the cub were now maintaining normal oxygen levels, even while sharing the single mask. Their synchronized breathing had somehow made the shared oxygen more efficient than it should have been. "That's impossible, according to everything I know about medicine," she said. "Maybe," Connor replied. "Some things are bigger than medicine." As they drove through the storm toward St. Mary's Hospital, baby Luca continued his vigil over the little bear cub. His small hand never wavered in holding the oxygen mask, and his eyes remained fixed on his new friend with a determination that seemed far beyond his young age. The cub, growing stronger with each mile, had wrapped its tiny paw around the baby's wrist. They were no longer just patient and patient. They had become something more. They had become proof that compassion knows no boundaries, and that sometimes the youngest hearts understand love better than any adult mind can comprehend. But as the lights of St. Mary's Hospital came into view through the rain, both paramedics knew that the hardest part was yet to come. How do you separate two souls who have saved each other? And what would happen when the medical staff tried to take them apart? Connor's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he realized they were about to find out. As they pulled into the emergency bay at St. Mary's Hospital, Connor and Savannah could see Dr. Jessica Brooks waiting with her trauma team. She was known throughout the region as one of the best emergency physicians, but nothing in her 20 years of experience had prepared her for what she was about to witness. "What do we have?" Dr. Brooks called out as Connor jumped from the driver's seat. 18-month-old male, involved in MVA, possible internal injuries. But Dr. ... Savannah hesitated as she opened the back doors. "There's something you need to see first." Dr. Brooks approached the ambulance and froze. Inside, baby Luca was still holding the oxygen mask over the bear cub's snout with the unwavering determination. Both patients were awake and alert, their eyes locked on each other in a connection that defied medical explanation. Is that a bear?" Dr. Brooks whispered. "Yes, ma'am. They were both in the same accident. The baby has been sharing his oxygen with the cub for the past 40 minutes. Their vital signs have synchronized, and both are stable." Dr. Brooks checked her tablet for the incoming patient information, but there was nothing about a bear. "I don't understand. We only have protocols for human patients. The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center is across town." "Doctor," Connor said urgently, "you need to know something else. Every time we've tried to separate them, both patients become distressed. The baby's oxygen saturation drops immediately, and the cub goes into respiratory distress. That's medically impossible, doctor," Brooks said, but she was already putting on her gloves. "Let's get them inside. We'll figure this out in the trauma bay." As the team prepared to transfer the patients, something unexpected happened. Baby Luca began crying. Not the normal cry of a hurt child, but a sound that seemed to communicate distress to the cub. The little bear immediately responded with soft whimpering sounds, and both patients' monitors showed elevated heart rates. "They're communicating," Savannah observed. "It's like they have their own language." Nurse Ethan Marshall, who had been working in pediatric emergency care for over a decade, stepped forward. "Doctor, I've seen trauma bonding before, but never like this. Maybe we should keep them together until we can stabilize them separately." Dr. Brooks was torn between medical protocol and the evidence before her eyes. "All right, bring them both into Trauma Bay 1. But I want constant monitoring on both patients." As they wheeled the stretcher into the hospital, baby Luca never let go of the oxygen mask. Hospital staff stopped in their tracks, staring at the impossible sight of a human baby caring for a wild animal with such tenderness. Whispers followed them down the hallway. "Have you ever seen anything like this?" a nurse asked her colleague. "Never. It's like their family." In the trauma bay, Dr. Brooks began her examination of baby Luca while keeping a close eye on the cub. Every time she tried to check the baby more thoroughly, requiring him to release the oxygen mask, his stress levels spiked immediately. "Okay, little guy," she said gently to Luca. "I need to listen to your chest. Can you let your friend breathe on his own for just a minute?" Baby Luca looked at her with those bright blue eyes and shook his head, an action far too advanced for his age. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He pointed to the cub, then to the oxygen mask, then back to himself. He was trying to tell them that they needed to share it. "Did he just—" Ethan started. "Yes," Dr. Brooks said slowly. "He's trying to explain that they need to stay together." At that moment, Dr. Logan Hayes, the hospital's chief of wildlife veterinary medicine, rushed into the room. He had been called in from his research facility when word spread about the unusual patient. "I came as soon as I heard," he said, approaching the cub carefully. "May I?" Dr. Brooks nodded, and Dr. Hayes began examining the small bear. "Remarkable," he murmured. "This cub should be in critical condition based on the injuries I'm seeing, but its vitals are surprisingly stable." "That's what we've been trying to tell you," Connor said. "Ever since the baby started sharing his oxygen, both patients have been doing better than they should be." Dr. Hayes looked more closely at the scene. The baby's small hand was carefully positioned to keep the oxygen mask at exactly the right angle for the cub to breathe comfortably. The cub's paw was wrapped around the baby's wrist, not gripping tightly, but maintaining gentle contact. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Hayes said. "In all my years studying human-animal interactions, I've never seen anything like this. The cub is responding to the baby as if he were another cub, a litter mate." "And the baby?" Dr. Brooks asked. "The baby is showing caregiving behaviors that shouldn't develop until much later in human development. Children his age are typically self-focused. This level of empathy and sustained helping behavior, it's unprecedented." Just then, the trauma bay doors burst open. A man and woman rushed in, soaking wet from the storm. The woman's face was streaked with tears, and the man's clothes were torn from climbing through the wreckage of their car. "Luca!" the woman cried out. "My baby!" Baby Luca heard his mother's voice and turned his head, his face lighting up with recognition. But he didn't let go of the oxygen mask. Instead, he pointed to the cub and made urgent babbling sounds, as if trying to tell his parents about his new friend. "Mom, Dad, I'm Dr. Brooks." She introduced herself to Avery and Michael Winters. "Your son is going to be fine, but we have an unusual situation here." Michael Winters stared at the scene in disbelief. Why is my son holding an oxygen mask over a bear?" "Your son saved this cub's life," Savannah explained, stepping forward. "He's been sharing his oxygen for the past hour. Every time we try to separate them, both patients become distressed." Avery Winters approached the stretcher slowly, tears streaming down her face. "Luca, sweetheart, Mommy's here." The baby smiled at his mother but continued his vigil over the cub. He made soft cooing sounds and gestured between the cub and his parents, as if introducing them. "He wants us to meet his friend," Avery whispered, understanding flooding her face. That's when something magical happened. Avery gently placed her hand next to her son's on the oxygen mask. "Hello, little one," she said softly to the cub. "Thank you for being friends with my baby." The cub looked up at her with dark, intelligent eyes and made a soft sound that almost seemed like a greeting. Michael joined them, placing his larger hand over both his wife's and son's. "We're all here now," he said quietly. Dr. Brooks watched this scene unfold with growing amazement. The monitors showed that all three humans now had synchronized heart rates, and the cub's vitals were the strongest they had been since arriving at the hospital. "Doctor," Ethan called out, "you need to see this." Dr. Brooks looked at the monitors. Not only were the humans and the cub maintaining synchronized vital signs, but the baby's oxygen saturation was actually improving while sharing the mask. It defied every principle of respiratory medicine she knew. "How is this possible?" she asked Dr. Hayes. "I have a theory," he said thoughtfully. "There are documented cases of therapeutic bonding between humans and animals, but this is something more. The baby and cub have formed what appears to be a symbiotic emotional connection. Their nervous systems are somehow communicating and regulating each other." "Are you saying they're healing each other?" "I'm saying they're keeping each other alive in a way that transcends normal medical understanding." At that moment, the trauma bay doors opened again, and Connor stepped in with a grim expression. "Doctor, we have a problem. The mother bear is outside." Everyone turned to look at him. "What do you mean, outside?" Dr. Brooks asked. "She followed us here. She's in the parking lot with 2 other bears. Hospital security has cordoned off the area, but she's not leaving. She keeps calling out, and every time she does, the cub responds." As if on cue, a deep, resonant call echoed through the hospital walls. The little cub immediately lifted its head and made answering sounds. Baby Luca, still holding the oxygen mask, began making similar sounds, as if translating between the cub and its mother. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Hayes said, his voice filled with wonder. "The mother bear has somehow understood that her cub is being cared for here. She's not showing aggression, she's showing trust." Avery Winters looked between her son, the cub, and the doctors. "What happens now? Can you save them both?" Dr. Brooks was quiet for a moment, weighing medical protocols against the miracle unfolding before her. "Honestly, I don't know. We're in uncharted territory here, but one thing is clear. These 2 patients have formed a bond that's keeping them alive. Separating them could be dangerous for both." "So, what do you suggest?" Michael asked. "We keep them together," Dr. Brooks decided. "At least until we can stabilize them both separately. This goes against every protocol we have, but sometimes medicine isn't just about following rules. Sometimes it's about recognizing when something bigger than medical science is at work." Dr. Hayes nodded in agreement. "I'll stay here to monitor the cub. We'll need to set up a joint care protocol, something that's never been done before." As the medical team worked around them, baby Luca continued his gentle care of the little bear cub. His parents stayed by his side, still amazed by their son's extraordinary compassion. The oxygen mask remained perfectly positioned, 2 small beings breathing together in a rhythm that seemed to echo something ancient and profound. Outside, the mother bear's calls grew softer, as if she sensed that her cub was safe. But everyone in that trauma bay knew this was just the beginning of an impossible situation. How long could they maintain this arrangement? What would happen when the cub was healthy enough to return to the wild? And how could they explain this medically impossible bond to anyone who hadn't witnessed it themselves? Dr. Brooks looked at the synchronized monitors and shook her head in wonder. In 20 years of emergency medicine, she thought she had seen everything. But baby Luca and his wild friend were teaching her that there are some things that can't be learned in medical school, things that can only be understood by the heart. 3 hours later, the situation had become even more extraordinary. Word had spread throughout the hospital about the baby and bear cub, and staff members were finding excuses to walk past Trauma Bay 1. But it wasn't just curious onlookers that were gathering. Dr. Sarah Chen, the hospital's head of pediatric psychology, had been called in to assess the situation. She stood outside the trauma bay, observing through the window with a mixture of fascination and concern. "In my professional opinion," she said to Dr. Brooks, "what we're witnessing challenges everything we know about early childhood development. That baby is demonstrating caretaking behaviors that typically don't emerge until age 3 or 4. "And what's your recommendation?" Dr. Brooks asked. "Medically, I can't explain it. Psychologically, I've never seen anything like it. But emotionally—" Dr. Chen paused, watching as baby Luca gently stroked the cub's fur while maintaining the oxygen mask. "I think we're witnessing something that transcends normal human development. This child has formed a bond that's teaching him empathy at a cellular level." Inside the trauma bay, something new was happening. Baby Luca had begun making rhythmic humming sounds. Not typical baby babble, but a melodic pattern that seemed to soothe the cub. The bear responded by making soft rumbling noises, creating what could only be described as a duet between species. Avery Winters watched her son in amazement. "He's never hummed like that before," she whispered to her husband. "It's almost like he's singing to the cub." Nurse Ethan Marshall had been monitoring both patients closely and noticed something alarming on the machines. "Doctor," he called out, "the cub's temperature's dropping." Dr. Hayes checked the small bear immediately. "It's going into shock. The adrenaline from the accident is wearing off, and its body is starting to shut down." "What does that mean for Luca?" Michael asked, fear creeping into his voice. Dr. Brooks checked the baby's monitors. "His temperature's dropping too. Their systems are so synchronized that the cub's condition is affecting him directly." "We need to warm the cub immediately," Dr. Hayes said, reaching for heating blankets. But as the medical team moved to surround the cub with warming equipment, baby Luca became agitated. He made urgent sounds and tightened his grip on the oxygen mask, clearly understanding that his friend was in danger. "Wait," Avery said suddenly. "What if—" She approached the stretcher and gently lifted her shirt. Skin-to-skin contact. It's what we did when Luca was born prematurely. It helped regulate his temperature and heart rate. Dr. Brooks looked uncertain. "Mrs. Winters, that's a wild animal. We can't put it directly on human skin." "But what if the baby could do it?" Dr. Hayes suggested. "If they're already bonded at this level, direct contact might stabilize both of them." It was an unthinkable suggestion by any medical standard, but the monitors were showing that both patients were declining rapidly. Dr. Brooks made another decision that went against every protocol she knew. "All right, but we do this under controlled conditions. Full monitoring, and if either patient shows any signs of distress, we separate them immediately." Nurse Ethan prepared a sterile barrier, while Dr. Hayes carefully lifted the small cub. Baby Luca seemed to understand what was happening and reached out eagerly for his friend. When the cub was placed against the baby's chest, something miraculous happened. Both patients' vital signs immediately stabilized. Their temperatures began rising in perfect synchronization. Their heart rates settled into a steady rhythm, and the oxygen saturation levels improved dramatically. The cub nuzzled against Luca's chest, and the baby wrapped his tiny arms around the small bear with infinite gentleness. "This is impossible," Dr. Brooks breathed. "Every medical textbook says this shouldn't work." "Maybe," said a new voice from the doorway. "Medical textbooks don't cover everything." Everyone turned to see an elderly man with kind eyes and weathered hands. He wore simple clothes and moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent his life in nature. I'm sorry, Doctor, Brooks said. Visiting hours are over, and this is a restricted area. My name is Thomas Blackwood, the man said calmly. I've been following this story since it began. I'm the one who called about the mother bear. Connor stepped forward. You're the one who's been tracking her? For 40 years I've been studying the bear families in these forests. The mother outside is named Luna. The cub your young patient is caring for is her firstborn. Thomas approached the stretcher slowly, his eyes taking in the scene with wonder. I've never seen anything like this in 4 decades of wildlife research. Dr. Hayes studied the older man carefully. Are you a researcher? A veterinarian? I'm many things, but right now I'm here because Luna asked me to come. The room fell silent, except for the steady beeping of monitors and the soft breathing sounds coming from the baby and cub. What do you mean, she asked you? Avery questioned. Thomas smiled gently. Bears are more intelligent than most people realize. Luna has been communicating with me since she was a cub herself. She understands that humans have her baby, and she wanted me to check if her little one is safe. That's... Dr. Brooks started to say impossible, but she had used that word too many times today. Doctor, Thomas continued, what you're witnessing here is something that indigenous cultures have known for thousands of years. Sometimes souls recognize each other across species. This baby and this cub have formed what we call a spirit bond. They're not just helping each other heal, they're sharing life force itself. As if to demonstrate his point, baby Luca began his humming again, but this time something extraordinary happened. Other patients in nearby rooms stopped crying. The monitors throughout the pediatric ward showed improved vital signs across the board. Somehow, the baby's humming was creating a healing frequency that affected everyone within range. The other children, Nurse Ethan said in amazement, they're all calmer. Dr. Chen, who had been silent until now, spoke up. There are theories about therapeutic sound frequencies and their effects on healing, but to see it happening like this, with a baby who shouldn't even understand the concept of helping others. Children often understand things that adults have forgotten, Thomas said wisely. This little one hasn't learned yet that bears and humans are supposed to be different. He only knows another being needed help, and he gave it. Dr. Brooks checked the latest blood work results that had just come in. Both patients are showing accelerated healing. The baby's minor internal injuries are resolving faster than normal, and the cub's internal bleeding has stopped completely. How long can we maintain this arrangement? Michael asked the question everyone was thinking. That depends, Dr. Hayes said carefully, on how long we can justify keeping a wild animal in a hospital. The state wildlife authorities have been notified. They'll want to transfer the cub to a rehabilitation facility soon. And what happens then? Avery asked, looking at her son who was so peacefully connected to his wild friend. I don't know, Doctor, Brooks admitted. We're in uncharted territory. Thomas stepped closer to the stretcher and spoke softly to both the baby and cub. To everyone's amazement, both patients turned their attention to him as if they understood his words. Little ones, he said gently, you've shown everyone here what true compassion looks like. But soon, young bear, you'll need to return to your mother and the forest. And, young human, you'll need to grow up in your own world. Baby Luca looked up at Thomas with those bright blue eyes and made soft questioning sounds, as if asking why they had to be separated. Because, Thomas continued, your path together was meant to be short but powerful. You've taught these adults things they needed to learn, but now you must each return to your own families and carry this love with you always." The cub made a soft whimpering sound and pressed closer to Luca. The baby responded by tightening his gentle embrace, clearly understanding that their time together was limited. "Not yet," Avery said firmly. "They're not ready yet. Look at them." She was right. Both patients were still breathing in perfect synchronization, their vital signs stronger together than apart. The bond they had formed was still sustaining them both. "Mrs. Winters," Dr. Hayes said gently, "the longer we wait, the harder it will be for both of them. But what if separating them causes more harm than good?" she argued. "What if this bond is the only thing keeping them alive?" Dr. Brooks looked at the monitors again, then at the peaceful scene on the stretcher. "We give them one more day, 24 hours, to see if they can maintain stability independently. If not, we keep them together until they can," Michael finished. As night fell over the hospital, baby Luca and the little bear cub continued their miraculous healing journey together. Outside, Luna the mother bear had settled down in the hospital parking lot, no longer pacing restlessly. Somehow, she seemed to understand that her cub was exactly where he needed to be. But Thomas Blackwood knew something the others didn't. He had seen this type of spirit bond only once before, 40 years ago, between a lost human child and a wolf pup. That connection had saved both their lives, but it had also changed them forever. As he sat in the waiting room that night, keeping vigil over the impossible friendship developing in Trauma Bay 1, Thomas wondered what changes this bond would bring to baby Luca and the cub. Some connections, he knew, leave marks on the soul that last a lifetime. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, marking the beginning of what would prove to be the most crucial day in this extraordinary story. Inside Trauma Bay 1, two young souls continued breathing together, their hearts beating in harmony, unaware that forces beyond their control were already planning their separation. But sometimes the universe has other plans. And sometimes love is stronger than any protocol ever written. Dawn broke over St. Mary's Hospital with an unexpected commotion. Dr. Brooks arrived early to check on her unusual patients, only to find Trauma Bay 1 surrounded by twice the normal medical staff. Something significant had happened during the night shift. "Doctor, you need to see this immediately," called Dr. Amanda Foster, the night shift supervisor. Her voice carried a mix of excitement and bewilderment that made Dr. Brooks quicken her pace. Inside the trauma bay, she found baby Luca and the cub exactly as she had left them, skin to skin, breathing in harmony. But something was different. The monitors showed readings that shouldn't have been possible. "What am I looking at?" Dr. Brooks asked, studying the displays. "Both patients' cellular regeneration rates are accelerated by approximately 300%, Dr. Foster explained. "The baby's minor fractures have completely healed overnight. The cub's internal injuries are resolving at a rate we've never documented." Dr. Hayes, who had spent the night monitoring the cub, looked exhausted but amazed. "Doctor, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've never seen anything like it. The cub's damaged organs are regenerating. Not healing, regenerating. That's medically impossible," Dr. Brooks said automatically, then caught herself. "I really need to stop saying that." Nurse Ethan approached with a tablet full of test results. "Doctor, it gets stranger. We ran blood tests every 4 hours as per your orders. Look at this." He showed her the lab reports. Both the baby and cub were producing identical proteins that weren't found in normal human or bear physiology. Their immune systems had somehow synchronized and were creating new antibodies together. "They're literally evolving together," Dr. Chen observed from the doorway. She had arrived early, unable to sleep after witnessing yesterday's events. "This challenges everything we know about biology, psychology, and medicine." At that moment, Avery and Michael Winters rushed in, having received an urgent call from the hospital. "Is Luca okay?" Avery asked frantically. They said there were developments during the night. "Mrs. Winters," Dr. Brooks said carefully, "your son is more than okay. He's, well, see for yourself." Avery approached the stretcher and gasped. Baby Luca looked healthier than he had since before the accident. His skin had a healthy glow, his breathing was strong and clear, and most remarkably a small birthmark on his arm that had been there since birth was now gone. "How is this possible?" Michael whispered. "We don't know, Doctor," Hayes admitted. "But whatever connection these two have formed, it's changing them at a cellular level." Thomas Blackwood appeared in the doorway, having been kept informed of developments throughout the night. "May I?" he asked, permission to approach. Dr. Brooks nodded, and Thomas came to stand beside the stretcher. He observed the baby and cub for a long moment before speaking. "In my culture, we have stories of the twin souls, beings born in different forms but sharing one spirit. They say such pairs can rewrite the laws of nature itself." He looked at the medical staff. "I think you're witnessing something that hasn't happened in centuries." "Mr. Blackwood," Dr. Brooks said, "with all due respect, we're scientists here. We deal in medical facts, not folklore." Thomas smiled gently. "Doctor, yesterday you would have said it was impossible for a baby to share oxygen with a bear cub and survive. Today, you're watching them regenerate tissue together. Perhaps it's time to consider that science doesn't yet have all the answers." Just then, the trauma bay doors burst open again. This time, it was Connor and Savannah from the ambulance crew, accompanied by a woman in an official uniform. "Doctor," Connor said urgently, "this is Agent Sarah Collins from the Department of Wildlife Conservation. She's here about the cub." Agent Collins, a stern-looking woman in her 40s, stepped forward with an air of authority. "Dr. Brooks, I'm here to transfer the bear cub to a state wildlife facility immediately. This situation has gone on long enough." "Agent Collins," Dr. Brooks said carefully, "I understand your concerns, but these patients have a unique medical situation that requires—" "Doctor, with all due respect, you're harboring a wild animal in a human medical facility. This violates numerous state and federal regulations. The cub needs to be relocated now." Avery stepped protectively closer to the stretcher. "You can't separate them. Look at what they're doing for each other. Ma'am, I sympathize with your situation, but this bear needs to return to the wild eventually. The longer we wait, the more difficult that transition will be." "But they're healing each other," Michael protested. "Can't you see that?" Agent Collins looked at the monitors and charts, her expression skeptical. "What I see is a dangerous situation that needs to be resolved. I have a specialized transport unit outside and a team ready to sedate the cub for transfer." "No!" The word came out sharper than Dr. Brooks intended. "Agent Collins, I'm the attending physician here, and I'm telling you that separating these patients could be fatal to both." "Doctor, are you seriously suggesting that a human baby's life depends on a bear cub? I'm telling you that's exactly what our medical evidence shows." The tension in the room was palpable. Baby Luca, sensing the distress around him, began making distressed sounds. The cub immediately responded, nuzzling closer to the baby protectively. Their heart rates, which had been beautifully synchronized, began to spike. "Look," said Dr. Chen quietly, pointing to the monitors. "Look what's happening when they sense threat." Both patients' vital signs were becoming erratic. The baby's temperature was rising, and the cub was beginning to show signs of the respiratory distress that had nearly killed it in the ambulance. "We need to calm everyone down," Dr. Hayes said urgently. The stress is affecting them both. Thomas stepped forward and began speaking in low, soothing tones to both the baby and cub. Remarkably, his voice seemed to have an immediate, calming effect. Their heart rates began to settle, and the baby stopped crying. "Agent Collins," Thomas said calmly, "I've worked with wildlife conservation for 40 years. I understand your position, but forcing a separation now could undo all the healing they've accomplished." "And what do you suggest?" she asked, her tone slightly less aggressive. "Give us 48 more hours. If they can be safely separated by then, we'll cooperate fully with the transfer." Agent Collins looked around the room at all the faces watching her. The medical data was undeniable, even if it defied explanation. 48 hours, she agreed reluctantly. "But I want full documentation of every hour. If either animal or human show signs of dependency issues that could affect future reintegration into their respective environments, I'm stepping in immediately." Dr. Brooks nodded. "Agreed. Thank you, Agent Collins." As the wildlife agent left, the trauma bay fell quiet, except for the steady beeping of monitors and the soft breathing of the two patients. The next 48 hours would determine whether this miraculous bond could evolve into something that allowed both the baby and cub to thrive separately. But what none of them knew was that outside the hospital, other forces were already in motion. Luna, the mother bear, had been joined by her mate and several other bears from their extended family. They weren't leaving. They were waiting. And in the forest beyond, something else was stirring. Dr. Hayes received a call on his emergency phone. It was from the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. "Doctor," the voice on the other end was agitated, "we've got a problem. Every bear within a 50-mile radius is moving toward your location. We've never seen anything like it." Dr. Brooks overheard the conversation. "What does that mean?" Thomas, who had been quietly observing the baby and cub, looked up with concern. "It means the connection between these two is stronger than we thought. The bear community is responding to their cub's situation. They're gathering to protect him." "How many bears are we talking about?" Dr. Brooks asked. "Our satellite tracking shows at least 30 bears converging on this area," came the voice from the phone. "They're not showing aggression, but they're not leaving either. It's like they're waiting for something." Avery clutched her husband's hand. "What does this mean for Luca?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, thinking. "In my grandfather's stories, when twin souls are threatened with separation, nature itself responds to protect the bond. The bears aren't here to attack. They're here to serve as guardians until the crisis passes. So, we have 48 hours to figure this out," Dr. Brooks said, "with 30 bears surrounding the hospital." "Correction." Agent Collins' voice came from the doorway. She had overheard the conversation. "We now have 30 bears, national media attention, and federal wildlife experts flying in from Washington. This situation just became a lot more complicated." She held up her tablet, showing news reports already spreading across the internet. "Miracle baby saves bear cub's life," read one headline. "Hospital surrounded by bears in standoff," read another. "How did the media find out?" Michael asked. Connor raised his hand sheepishly. "Someone in the ambulance crew posted about it on social media last night. It's been shared thousands of times." Dr. Brooks rubbed her temples. "So, now we have the medical mystery, the wildlife authorities, 30 bears, and the entire world watching. And 48 hours to figure out how to safely separate two souls that may be more connected than any partnership in recorded history," Dr. Chen added. Baby Luca chose that moment to make a soft cooing sound, and the cub responded with an equally gentle rumble. they remained perfectly content with each other, oblivious to the chaos their bond had created around them. "Maybe," said Thomas quietly, "the question isn't how to separate them. Maybe it's how to honor what they've taught us." But as the morning progressed and more officials arrived at the hospital, it became clear that the simple question of separation was about to become much more complex. Baby Luca and his wild friend had not only formed an impossible bond, they had created a situation that would challenge everything society believed about the boundaries between human and animal, medicine and miracle, and the very nature of love itself. The clock was ticking, and outside the hospital, 30 bears waited patiently for an outcome that no one could predict. By noon, St. Mary's Hospital had transformed into something resembling a military compound. News vans lined the streets, federal agents in dark suits walked the corridors, and a team of scientists from the CDC had set up a mobile laboratory in the parking lot. Through it all, the bears remained, sitting peacefully in a large circle around the hospital grounds, as if holding vigil. Dr. Brooks found herself in an emergency meeting with Dr. Patricia Hawkins, the hospital administrator, Agent Collins, and a new arrival, Dr. Marcus Webb from the National Institute of Health. "Dr. Brooks," Dr. Hawkins began tersely, "this situation has spiraled beyond anything we can handle. We have federal agencies, wildlife experts, and half the world's media camped outside our doors, all because of one baby and one bear cub." Dr. Webb, a distinguished man in his 60s, leaned forward. "Doctor, I've reviewed all the medical files. What you're documenting is impossible according to current medical science. Shared cellular regeneration, synchronized biology between different species, accelerated healing rates. These aren't just anomalies, they're fundamental challenges to everything we understand about biology." "With respect, Dr. Webb," Dr. Brooks replied, "impossible or not, it's happening. My priority is the welfare of both patients." "Which brings us to our problem," Agent Collins interjected. "We now have government biologists who want to study both subjects. The Department of Defense is interested in the implications of what they're calling symbiotic regeneration, and the Environmental Protection Agency wants to examine whether this represents some new form of cross-species evolution." Dr. Brooks felt her stomach drop. "You want to turn them into research subjects?" "Nobody wants that," Dr. Webb said carefully. "But Dr. Brooks, if we can understand how this bond allows accelerated healing, we could revolutionize medicine. Imagine the applications for trauma victims, cancer patients, organ transplant recipients." "I don't care about the applications," Dr. Brooks said firmly. "I care about a baby and a cub who need medical care, not experimentation." At that moment, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Through the conference room window, they could see people running toward Trauma Bay 1. Dr. Brooks rushed out, her heart racing with fear that something had happened to Luca and the cub. When she reached the trauma bay, she found something extraordinary happening. Baby Luca was no longer lying down. He was sitting up, supporting himself with one arm, while keeping the other wrapped protectively around the cub. This should have been impossible. He was only 18 months old and had been severely injured just 3 days ago. "Doctor," Nurse Ethan said in amazement. "He just sat up on his own. His muscle development and coordination have advanced by months overnight." Dr. Hayes was equally astounded. "The cub's bone density has increased by 40%. Its muscle mass has grown significantly. They're both physically maturing at an extraordinary rate." Avery and Michael rushed to their son's side. "Luca, sweetheart," Avery said in wonder, "look how strong you are." Baby Luca looked up at his mother and spoke a single, clear word. "Bear." The room fell silent. It was his first word, pronounced perfectly. Did he just... Michael started. He said, "Bear," Avery whispered, tears flowing down her cheeks. The cub, as if responding to being named, nuzzled closer to Luca and made a soft sound that almost seemed like baby in bear language. Dr. Chen, who had been observing from the corner, approached slowly. This is unprecedented. Language development happening at this rate, the physical advancement, the interspecies communication, they're not just healing each other. They're evolving each other. Thomas Blackwood, who had maintained his vigil throughout the night, spoke quietly. In the old stories, when twin souls find each other, they don't just heal, they become more than what they were meant to be alone. Dr. Webb, who had followed the commotion to the trauma bay, stood at the back of the room, taking notes furiously. Dr. Brooks, this changes everything. We're looking at controlled evolution, accelerated development, enhanced cognition. The implications are staggering. The implications are that a baby and a bear cub have found something beautiful together, Dr. Brooks said sharply, and you want to study it like a lab experiment. Doctor, please understand, Dr. Webb said, this could change human medicine forever. If we can replicate this bond, this healing process, we could cure diseases that have plagued humanity for millennia. And what happens to them? Avery asked, holding her son closer. What happens to my baby and his friend? Before Dr. Webb could answer, alarms started sounding throughout the hospital. Through the windows, they could see something that made everyone freeze in shock. The circle of bears outside had stood up in unison and were moving closer to the hospital. But they weren't alone. From the forest emerged more animals: deer, elk, wolves, even a family of raccoons, all moving together in a peaceful procession toward the building. "What's happening?" Dr. Hawkins asked in panic. Thomas moved to the window, his face filled with awe. They feel it too. The bond between the baby and cub is creating something larger. The animals are responding to it. Agent Collins was on her radio immediately. "We need wildlife control units here now. We have dozens of wild animals approaching the building." "No," Thomas said firmly. "Don't call for control. They're not here to attack. They're here to witness." "Witness what?" Dr. Brooks asked. "Something that hasn't happened in over 1,000 years. A harmony creation." As if responding to their conversation, baby Luca began humming again. But this time, the sound was different, more complex, more melodic. The cub joined in with gentle rumbling tones that blended perfectly with the baby's voice. Together, they created a sound that seemed to reach every corner of the hospital. Throughout the building, people stopped what they were doing. Patients reported feeling better, pain levels dropping, anxiety fading. The animals outside settled into a peaceful circle around the hospital, all seeming to listen to the impossible duet coming from Trauma Bay 1. "The frequency," Dr. Chen said in wonder. "It's affecting everyone. Look at the monitors." She was right. Every patient in the hospital was showing improved vital signs. Heart rates were stabilizing, blood pressure normalizing, stress indicators dropping. Dr. Webb was recording everything on his tablet, his excitement barely contained. "This is beyond anything we've theorized. They're creating a healing field that extends beyond themselves." "They're creating hope," Dr. Brooks corrected quietly. But their moment of wonder was interrupted by Dr. Hawkins, rushing in with her phone pressed to her ear. "Doctor, Brooks, we have a problem. The CDC wants to quarantine the entire hospital. They're declaring this a biohazard situation." "Biohazard?" Dr. Brooks exclaimed. "There's nothing hazardous here. These patients are healing, not hurting anyone." "The CDC doesn't see it that way. Unknown, biological processes, unexplained cellular changes, interspecies, physiological sharing. They consider it a potential threat to public health. Through the windows, they could see vehicles with CDC markings arriving, along with military vehicles. Personnel in hazmat suits were beginning to set up a perimeter. "They can't do this," Avery said desperately. "My son isn't a threat to anyone." Agent Collins looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Winters, I'm afraid the situation has moved beyond local wildlife authority. This is now a federal matter involving national security." "National security?" Michael asked in disbelief. "They're a baby and a bear cub who love each other." Dr. Webb stepped forward. "The healing abilities they're demonstrating, the accelerated evolution, the expansion of their influence to other living beings. The government sees this as either a potential weapon or a potential cure for biological warfare agents. Either way, they want control." Thomas moved to stand beside the stretcher where Luca and the cub continued their gentle duet, oblivious to the chaos around them. "These children represent something pure, a connection that exists beyond human understanding. And you want to cage it, study it, turn it into something that serves human ambition." "Mr. Blackwood," Dr. Webb said, "surely you understand the potential benefits to society." "I understand," Thomas replied, "that some things are more important than what we can gain from them. These two have something sacred. They found each other across species, across the barriers that usually separate all living things. And instead of celebrating that miracle, you want to dissect it." Outside, the CDC personnel were setting up equipment. Through the intercom, a voice announced, "This is a federal emergency declaration. All personnel are to remain in place until further notice. This facility is being placed under biological containment protocols." Dr. Brooks felt her world spinning out of control. In just 3 days, a simple ambulance call had become an international incident. And at the center of it all were two innocent souls whose only crime was loving each other. Baby Luca looked up at all the adults around him and said his second word, clear as a bell, "Home." The cub responded with a sound that everyone somehow understood meant the same thing. But where was home for two beings who had transcended the boundaries of their own species? And would the world let them find it together? As evening fell on the 4th day, St. Mary's Hospital stood under federal lockdown, surrounded by military personnel, government scientists, and dozens of wild animals who refused to leave. Inside Trauma Bay 1, a baby boy and a bear cub continued to heal each other, unaware that their love had become the center of a storm that would soon force the world to question everything it believed about the connections between all living things. The 48-hour deadline was approaching fast, but now separation was the least of their concerns. The question was no longer whether Luca and the cub could be safely separated, but whether anyone would have the courage to let them stay together against the will of the most powerful institutions in the world. Time was running out, and both patients seemed to sense it. Their bond was growing stronger by the hour, but so was the determination of those who wanted to exploit it. The next 24 hours would determine not just the fate of a baby and a cub, but the future of their impossible connection and what it represented for the relationship between humanity and the natural world. As dawn broke on the 5th day, something extraordinary happened that no one could have predicted. The entire hospital fell silent, not just quiet, but completely silent. The mechanical hums of equipment, the beeping of monitors, even the whispered conversations of staff and officials all stopped at exactly 6 a.m. In Trauma Bay 1, baby Luca and the bear cub were sitting facing each other, their small hands and paws touching. Their eyes were closed, and a soft golden light seemed to emanate from the space between them. Not bright enough to see clearly, but present enough that everyone in the room could feel it. "What's happening?" Dr. Webb whispered, breaking the silence. Thomas Blackwood, who had spent the night in meditation beside their bed, opened his eyes with tears streaming down his face. "They're choosing," he said softly. "Choosing what?" Dr. Brooks asked. "Whether to stay connected and face what the world will do to them, or to release each other and return to their separate lives." The golden glow intensified slightly, and suddenly everyone in the room could feel what the baby and cub were experiencing. It was a sensation of pure love. Not the complex, conditional love that adults know, but the simple, profound love of two souls who had recognized each other completely. Avery and Michael felt it most strongly. Through some impossible connection, they could sense their son's thoughts and emotions as clearly as if he were speaking to them. He wasn't afraid. He was at peace, and he was making a choice that would affect not just himself, but everyone who had witnessed their bond. The cub's mother, Luna, appeared at the window. She had somehow made it past all the security, all the military perimeters, all the fences. She pressed her massive paw against the glass and made a sound that wasn't quite a roar, but something gentler, something that sounded like understanding. Baby Luca opened his eyes and looked at his parents. When he spoke, his voice was still that of an 18-month-old child, but the words carried wisdom far beyond his age. "Love bigger than scared," he said clearly. The bear cub opened its eyes and looked at its mother through the window. It made a sound that everyone somehow understood meant love bigger than different. Then, together, they began to hum again. But this time, their song was different. Instead of the healing frequency they had been creating, this sound was something else entirely. It was a song of release, of gratitude, of love given freely without expectation of return. The golden light between them grew brighter, and then something miraculous happened. Every person in the hospital, doctors, nurses, patients, government officials, military personnel, even the hardened CDC researchers, felt a wave of healing wash over them. Not just physical healing, but emotional healing. Old wounds closed, bitter hearts softened, fear transformed into hope. Dr. Webb, who had been so focused on studying and exploiting their bond, suddenly understood something that his decades of scientific training had never taught him. Some things in the universe weren't meant to be captured or controlled. They were meant to be experienced, honored, and allowed to exist freely. "We have to let them choose," he announced to the room. "This isn't about national security or medical breakthroughs. This is about respecting something sacred." Agent Collins nodded slowly, her stern demeanor completely transformed by what she was feeling. "The containment order is lifted," she said into her radio. "All personnel stand down. This is no longer classified as a threat situation." The golden light began to fade, and baby Luca and the bear cub slowly released their connection. But something fundamental had changed in both of them. They were no longer dependent on each other for survival, but they carried within them a permanent gift, the memory of perfect understanding, perfect love. Baby Luca looked at his parents and smiled a smile that held depths no child's expression should contain. "Home now," he said simply. The cub looked at its mother through the window and made a sound that meant the same thing. Dr. Brooks approached them carefully and was amazed by what the medical monitors showed. Both patients were completely healed, not just from their accident injuries, but from every imperfection their bodies had ever had. The baby's vitals were those of a perfectly healthy child. The cub showed the strength and vitality of a bear twice its age. "They can be separated safely now," she announced. "They've given each other everything they needed." Thomas opened the window, and Luna the mother bear gently pushed her massive head through. Her cub ran to her, and they nuzzled together with obvious joy. But before they left together, Luna did something unprecedented. She looked at baby Luca and made a sound of deep gratitude. Then she touched the baby's forehead with her nose, a gesture that in bear culture meant acceptance into the family. Luca reached out and touched her massive snout with his tiny hand. "Friend forever," he said. As Luna and her cub prepared to leave through the window to return to their forest home, something beautiful happened. The dozens of animals that had gathered around the hospital didn't disperse randomly. They formed a peaceful procession, following the mother bear and her cub back into the woods. It was as if they had come to witness something sacred and were now returning home with the blessing they had received. Avery picked up her son, holding him close as they watched the bears disappear into the trees. "What happens now?" she asked Thomas. The older man smiled peacefully. "Now they live their lives, but they're different, marked by what they've experienced together. Your son will grow up with an understanding of all living things that few humans ever achieve. The cub will return to the wild with a compassion that will make him a bridge between his world and ours." Dr. Brooks looked around the hospital and marveled at how everyone had been changed by what they'd witnessed. The government officials were already quietly packing up their equipment, no longer interested in studying what couldn't be replicated or controlled. The media attention would fade, but the people who had been present would carry this story with them forever. As the Winters family prepared to take their son home, baby Luca looked back once at the trauma bay where he had spent 5 days sharing life with an unlikely friend. He waved his small hand toward the window where the bears had disappeared and whispered, "Thank you." 6 months later, Dr. Brooks visited the forest where the bears lived. Thomas had invited her to see how the cub was thriving. They found Luna's family playing in a clearing, and when the young bear saw them approaching, he left his mother's side and walked up to Dr. Brooks without fear. She knelt down, and the young bear, now grown strong and healthy, gently touched her hand with his paw. In that touch, she felt an echo of the love she had witnessed in the hospital. The bear looked toward the city where he knew baby Luca lived and made a soft sound that carried on the wind like a message. Somewhere in a suburban home, 18-month-old Luca looked up from his toys toward the forest he couldn't see and smiled. He whispered a word that his parents had heard him say every day since leaving the hospital. "Friend." The bond between them had been transformed, but never broken. They had taught the world that love transcends all boundaries, species, understanding, even possibility itself. And in teaching that lesson, they had given everyone who witnessed their connection a glimpse of what the world could be if all creatures recognized the spark of life that connects every living thing. Sometimes miracles aren't meant to last forever. Sometimes they're meant to change everything in their brief, shining moment, and then release us to carry that change forward into a world that desperately needs to remember how to love without condition, help without expectation, and find family in the most unexpected places. In the forest, a young bear grew strong, wise, and gentle. In the city, a human child grew up with compassion beyond his years. And somewhere between their two worlds, the impossible love they shared continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways that would echo for generations to come. The universe had gifted them to each other for just 5 days, but those 5 days had been enough to remind everyone who witnessed them that miracles aren't just possible. They're happening all around us, waiting for hearts brave enough to recognize them, protect them, and let them change us forever.